What's up guys, today we're going to look at fuel cells and try to answer the question, are fuel cells dead? So I'm going to be covering a few different topics in this video, so grab a seat and let's get right into it. So I'm going to start off by talking about how I came to this question, and it begins like this. Any new car that is going to be coming out, whether it's from the traditional automakers or a new startup, is electric. And not fuel cell electric, but battery electric. There have been many proponents for hydrogen fuel cells in the past. Toyota is a big one, and they're still invested big in hydrogen. They really have no plans to build a battery electric vehicle. Now, another manufacturer who used to believe in hydrogen was Honda. Honda figured it out early, and they basically scrapped their idea for hydrogen fuel cells and are now going into battery electric vehicles because they see that is the wave of the future. So that got me thinking, if every new vehicle coming out today is battery electric, is the hydrogen fuel cell dead? And the short of it is no. Plain and simple, the fuel cell is not dead. Now, for those people that were impatient for the answer, there you go. So let's continue talking about why this is the case. So what is a fuel cell in the first place? Well, a fuel cell takes hydrogen, splits the electrons from the protons in a sort of proton membrane, and what the electrons do is they flow through a wire, generating electrical current. And that is how fuel cells provide electricity. And once electrons have flowed, they join back into the hydrogen atoms, where oxygen from the outside air mixes in with the hydrogen and reacts and produces water. It's a pretty simple process, and this you can kind of consider it as a battery. They produce DC current. And it's not that different from what a battery is. For a fuel cell, it needs a constant supply of hydrogen. Battery stores its energy within the cell itself. A fuel cell does not. So because of that, you would need a tank of hydrogen, or at least some sort of place where you can store the hydrogen. And this is basically where we get into the problems of hydrogen. The fuel cell itself is pretty efficient. It's about 60% efficient. So all the hydrogen that it receives, 60% of the energy gets converted into electrical current, which can then be used to power the electronics or propel the vehicle forward. But there are big downsides for hydrogen. First of all, hydrogen is extremely light. It's made up of one proton and one electron. And because of that, it's so small that it actually leaks. So with gasoline, you don't really have this problem because it's hydrocarbons, and hydrocarbon molecules are much heavier than a hydrogen molecule. What happens is, for gasoline, you don't need a sophisticated tank to store it and prevent it from leaking out. It can be a relatively simple solution. But for hydrogen, you first need to compress it down to liquid hydrogen, which in itself is an entirely very extremely inefficient process, and hope that none of it actually leaks through the tank itself. Another problem with hydrogen is where you get hydrogen from. Hydrogen is primarily produced by reformation of fossil fuels, coming mainly from natural gas. And obviously this can be changed because you can use more green sources like electrolysis to produce hydrogen. But there's one thing that you cannot escape, and that is efficiency. In electrolysis, what you do is you have a cathode and an anode, put it in water, and they separate the hydrogen from the oxygen. They essentially boil off, and then you have to actually capture the hydrogen and the oxygen separately. That process is only about 1/3 efficient. What that means is, if you have 3 kilowatts of electricity, you do electrolysis, capture the hydrogen, and if you react that hydrogen with oxygen again, you will only get 1 kilowatt of electricity back. So you lose about 2/3 of the energy that you put in, which isn't really an efficient process at all. And so getting hydrogen from sources like solar, wind, or just using electrolysis is not really one of the ways you want to go forward making hydrogen. And I think these all add up to why hydrogen isn't becoming more commonplace. That's not the only reasons why hydrogen is not commonplace, even excluding any efficiencies. Suppose, thought experiment here, hydrogen was 100% efficient. It was great. It was the best fuel we had. The issues come with actually transporting and storing the hydrogen. So what you have to do is get the hydrogen somewhere, whether it's on site or somewhere else, put it in trucks, tankers, or whatever, carry that hydrogen to the station just like we do with gasoline and diesel, and pump that hydrogen into vehicles. That entire process is not efficient. First of all, you need the infrastructure for it, which is crazily expensive, and that's primarily what is stopping the adoption of hydrogen vehicles as a whole. So there are more problems associated with the storage mechanism. Hydrogen isn't liquid at room temperature. It's a gas, and what that means is you actually have to compress the gas or cool it down to an extent that it is liquefied. And that in itself is also a very inefficient process, as what you need is electricity to run the pumps to actually pressurize the hydrogen in the tanks at the station that can be then pumped into vehicles to be driven. I mean, the only reason you would want hydrogen is because it has higher energy density, so you can get more range. But these days, look at the Model S. It has 402 miles of range. So range is not becoming a problem anymore, and it's becoming a non-issue as time progresses. Batteries are getting more energy dense. They'll have more range for the same weight factor. And cost. Batteries are getting cheaper, much cheaper in fact. Hydrogen fuel cells are quite expensive. On the topic of cost, refueling a hydrogen vehicle is more expensive than refueling a gasoline vehicle. So just think about that for a moment. If refueling a gasoline vehicle, say for example, takes $50, a hydrogen vehicle might take $60, whereas an electric vehicle, battery electric vehicle, takes like $5. It's about a tenth of the cost for the fuel itself. It entirely depends on location and what your electricity cost is, but that's a metric that you can use, about 1/5 to about 1/10 of the cost of gasoline. And so now you add all of that up, and you basically get a super inefficient process. You need a lot of infrastructure to actually be built out, which is going to cost a lot of money. And right now, using the cheapest way to get hydrogen from oil refinement, hydrogen is more expensive than gasoline. Now you add those factors up and you can see why hydrogen really didn't take off. And I think primarily it's due to the infrastructure. The next technology has to be miles better than what is being used right now. Hydrogen is quite the opposite. Battery electric vehicles accelerate quickly, have a low center of gravity for really good handling, and they barely cost anything to run and maintain. Excluding the range and charging network, they are just better cars. Now let's take a look at hydrogen. Hydrogen cars are generally slower than internal combustion engine vehicles. They need a battery to regulate the power going to the motors that the fuel cell cannot supply right away, because fuel cells do not react as quickly as a battery. Hydrogen vehicles cannot be fueled from home in your garage or driveway, which is actually very convenient. Trust me on this one. It's like plugging in your phone overnight. You don't actually have to go to a specific place to charge your phone once a week or so. You just have a charger near your bedside table, you plug it in, and in the morning your phone is fully charged, ready for the next day. That is exactly what battery electric vehicles do. For hydrogen, it resembles the same sort of process that we use normally for gasoline or diesel vehicles. Plus, hydrogen vehicles today actually have a worse range than ICE vehicles, and pretty much comparable to battery electric vehicles coming out today. So why do so many people want hydrogen to be the next big thing? It's simple. People hate change. They don't know what it's like to fill up an electric car in your driveway and have a full charge in the morning. They can't comprehend that thought because they've never done that. So because of this, if you ask someone why aren't they buying a battery electric vehicle, they'll say something along the lines of, oh, charge times are too long, even if they seldom take long road trips where they might need to charge at those chargers along the highway. And even then, within about 20 to 30 minutes, you're filled up, ready to go. And that's about the time it takes to go to the restroom, maybe grab something to eat. And by that time, your electric vehicle is ready to go for the next leg of your journey for another 2 to 3 hours. Whereas most people think of it like a gas station where you actually have to stand right next to the car when it's fueling up, which is completely false. And almost any EV driver can tell you almost no one does that. So with hydrogen, you basically have a more expensive ICE vehicle. You have to go someplace to fuel it up every single time, whether that's once a week, maybe twice a week, or twice a month even, entirely dependent on your use cases, which after using an EV seems extremely inconvenient, and it feels like the stupidest thing ever. Why not just plug in at home, just like a phone? It literally takes 2 seconds to plug in a phone at night and unplug in the morning, and you don't have to wait for your phone to charge. It's charged in the morning. That's the same thing that happens with electric vehicles. With hydrogen, you actually have to find a station. That's one of the biggest problems with infrastructure. And then once you do find a station, you actually have to wait there for about 5 minutes while you fuel up. Okay, now let's look at something that's never talked about. Fuel time for hydrogen. People always say that it takes 5 minutes, and companies advertise it like that as well. Here's the reality. When the hydrogen is pressurized in the tanks, it takes about 5 minutes to fuel up. However, once you've fueled up, it takes about 15 minutes before the next person behind you can actually use that same hydrogen station because the tank is not pressurized enough. So you have to go through this process of repressurizing the tank so it can give you that 5-minute refuel time. But in reality, that 5-minute refuel time is actually 20-minute refuel time because you have to spend 15 minutes waiting for the tank to repressurize. So the idea of a gas station where you can pull up right behind another car, maybe wait like a few minutes once they're done, and then just drive up and fuel up in 5 minutes and you're on your way is completely false. Now, without a doubt, I do think this problem will be solved in the future if hydrogen does become a reality and a lot of people actually start buying hydrogen vehicles and the infrastructure actually starts getting built out. I don't think this is an unsolvable problem. Having said that, the main reason why people want hydrogen to become a reality is because of that 5-minute refuel time. People don't want to be waiting around for their car to charge up for 30 or 40 minutes. So it's better that the car is just fueled up in 5 minutes. And I completely see where they're coming from. But charge times and hydrogen refuel times are not that different if you factor in that 15-minute wait time. Now, I know EVs aren't for everyone, at least not yet. The biggest complaint has been for people living in apartments. They can't get an EV because they don't have a place to charge overnight. Like people who live in a house who might have a driveway or a garage to park their car and charge up overnight. Some people living in an apartment don't have that flexibility. I agree with their sentiment for fueling up in 5 minutes, but suppose someone was in front of you who fueled up their hydrogen vehicle. Now you have to wait about 15 minutes before you can start fueling up your cars so that the tank at the station can repressurize. So really, the idea of fueling up in 5 minutes doesn't exist, at least not yet, for hydrogen vehicles. And now we can do a thought experiment here. So if we assume that this won't be a problem in about 5 to 10 years, and that if hydrogen does become a reality, that there'll be hydrogen stations everywhere and you could go across country, for example. Let's just assume that. So where will battery technology be in about 10 years? Well, we can see where battery technology will be in about 10 years if we go back 10 years and see where battery technology was. So 10 years ago, we had almost no high power chargers pretty much anywhere. The only company that was really building out any sort of high power charger was Tesla, and even then they only had a Roadster at the time. There's pretty much nothing, and maybe a few 50 kilowatt stations, maybe at Nissan dealerships because they were selling the Nissan Leaf. These days, you can find stations and pretty much go across country using Electrify America, and they have a power output of about 350 kilowatts. Now, no car can actually take 350 kilowatts just yet, so they future-proofed it. But cars like the Porsche Taycan, which can actually take 270 kilowatts, which is the quickest charging car in the world based on kilowatts, that effectively drops your charge time to about 15 minutes versus 1 hour that it would have been about 10 years ago. So that's about a 4 times quicker charge time. So let's assume that that keeps up. Let's assume that in another 10 years, charge time will drop by another 4x. So taking that 15-minute charge time, divide that by 4, and we basically get 3 minutes and 45 seconds in 10 years for a battery electric vehicle. That's about the same time that it takes gas cars to fuel up at a gas station. So now you don't have any compelling reason to buy a hydrogen car anymore, and especially no reason to buy a gas car because fuel times are very low, about 5 minutes or under 5 minutes now. Plus, for battery electric vehicles, today you can go across country, across the entirety of the US using a battery electric vehicle, and you can do the same in southern Canada. You can go from the west to the east coast in a battery electric vehicle with a range of about 300 kilometers or about 200 miles in Canada. And that's just happened in 10 years. In fact, we just got the chargers here in Canada about 2 years ago to go across country. 2 years ago, it was impossible. So now let's do the same thing for range. The best of the best BEVs had a range of about 200 miles, which was basically the Tesla Roadster at the time. But other EVs like the Nissan Leaf had a range of, well, below 100 miles, which was less than half the range of the Roadster. Now today, 10 years later, the Tesla Model S has a range of 402 miles, which is basically a doubling in range in 10 years. And most of the other EVs coming out today, they have a range of about 200 miles, which is about a doubling in their range as well. So we can assume every 10 years, the range doubles. So if we assume that's going to happen for the next 10 years, the longest range EV would have a range of about 800 miles. And normal electric vehicles that you can buy with your own money that would be pretty much comparable to cars that majority of people buy today, they would have a range of about 400 miles. Effectively doubling that 200-mile range in 10 years. And so if you look at the average range of ICE vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles, it's about 400 miles. So that means half of them actually have a range below 400 miles. So in 10 years, BEVs would have a range of 400 miles and a charge time of about 5 minutes, pretty much comparable to gas vehicles today. And where will hydrogen be in that time? Well, no one's really producing hydrogen other than Toyota, or hydrogen vehicles I should say. They're the only company that is trying to push the envelope of hydrogen technology. There's a Hyundai Nexo that's actually out right now that you can purchase, but it isn't really a good vehicle compared to the Kona, which comes in a full BEV form. So another reason for hydrogen, which was quick refuel time and longer range, is pretty much wiped out by battery electric vehicles with advancements in battery technology. So what else do you want me to say about fuel cells? They're really stupid. The legacy auto and oil companies have been trying to make hydrogen a thing for the past 30 years.
The General Motors Electrovan gets its electric power from hydrogen-oxygen fuel cells. Unlike batteries, fuel cells will run the van as long as its tank has fuel, just like a gasoline engine. But hydrogen and oxygen are expensive and impractical fuels for a car. What we need is fuel cells that can run on a hydrocarbon fuel and air.
Today, the cheapest hydrogen vehicles comes in around $60,000. A comparable BEV with around the same range would cost you about $40,000. So let's sum all of this up. Hydrogen vehicles are more expensive to buy, are more expensive to fuel, are less fun to drive, and are in fact less convenient as well? Well, I think that does it. Hydrogen fuel cells for consumer vehicles is dead. I think hydrogen may have a purpose in things like ships, trains, and possibly airplanes, but not for any sort of road-based transport. Just like having an elevator operator today seems stupid, all transport in the future will be battery electric and fully autonomous. In a few decades, it will be stupid to have a human operate such things. So let me know your thoughts on this in the comments down below, and we'll talk there. Thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll talk to you later.